In Romans chapter 11, who are the branches grafted into the olive tree? And so the answer to that is that the wild olive tree that is grafted in is Gentiles. So look with me at verse 17. Romans chapter 11 and verse 17. And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou, being a wild olive tree, wert grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree. So the thou there is the wild olive tree. So when it says, thou being a wild olive tree wert grafted in, it's obvious that what's grafted in is the wild olive tree. But who's the thou? You see how it says thou being a wild olive tree? Well, go up to verse 13. For I speak to you, Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. Well, in verse 13, who's Paul speaking to? It's obviously speaking to Gentiles because he specifically says it. For I speak to you, Gentiles. So in verse 17, when he says, thou being a wild olive tree, who's the thou? Well, it's got to be the Gentiles. So look with me at the chart just for a minute. If you think about time past and you think about Israel and Gentiles, Israel has an elevated position because we know that Israel was God's chosen people. Ephesians 2 tells us that in time past, Gentiles were aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and therefore strangers from the covenants of promise. In other words, what God did is He made these promises to Israel, and so if you weren't part of Israel, how much benefit did you get from the promises? None, because you got to be part of Israel to receive those promises. So when you think about time past, that's why Ephesians 2 says that Gentiles were without God and without hope. If they wanted to be in a right relationship with God, they needed to join themselves to Israel. But when you think about the dispensation of grace, what has God done? Well, what God has done today is Gentiles can have direct access to God. They do not need to go through Israel. And that's because Gentiles have been grafted in. We have direct access to God today. To make it perfectly clear, all that you need to do today to be saved is you don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to join yourself to the nation of Israel. All that anyone has to do is they need to understand they're a sinner, that Christ died for their sins, was buried, and rose again the third day. And the moment that they place their faith in His blood that He shed for them, and they trust His sacrifice for their sins, God saves them that instant. God doesn't require further works or church membership or tithing or water baptism or any other deed of righteousness. God saves by grace through faith in an instant when someone believes the gospel.